This is Miss KJ. If you finished 6-5A, B, and C, you are now ready to do the extension problems on the more advanced radical equations. All right, so you should have worksheet 6-5 extension, and now refer to problem number 1. Problem number 1 is the square root of 4x minus 3 equal x. So now, looking at our equation, the first thing that we want to do is, well, let's get our good equation protocol started by drawing our line down the center of the equal sign. And we want to look at the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and notice that there's a square root that's been isolated on the left-hand side. So we want to undo that square root. How do we undo that square root? By squaring that side, and if we square the left-hand side, we also have to do what? Square the right. By squaring the left-hand side, the square undoes the square root, and now we're left with just 4x minus 3, and of course x to the second power is just x squared. Now what we have is called a quadratic equation. So looking at our quadratic equation, we've learned several methods on how to solve one. We're now going to be using the factoring method, but before we do that, we have to get it in the correct form. So we're going to have to get the left-hand side equal to 0. So looking at the left-hand side, we're going to take this 4x, and what undoes a 4x? A minus 4x. So I'm going to subtract a 4x from this side, and then of course I would subtract it from the other side. Okay? Now there's a minus 3x, so what undoes a minus 3x? A plus 3x. So I'm going to add my 3x to the left side, and then add my 3x to the right side. So now looking at the left-hand side, my 4x is now canceled. My negative 3 plus my 3x cancels, and I have 0 equals, in my quadratic equation, x squared minus 4x plus 3 in standard form. So looking at our equation now, we have our quadratic equation set equal to 0. We can now apply the factoring method to solve. So by looking at our quadratic, we're going to now separate this into two of our linear factors. We know that this is an x squared, so the first term in each of our linear factors is going to be an x. And we've also studied several techniques on how to get the factors, and one of them is the box method. So we're going to make a little box to figure out what those two factors are going to be. So we're going to put our x squared here, and we're going to put our 3 here, and of course that's where x and x comes from. But now we need to look at that 3 because we need to get factors of 3 that when we add them we get a negative 4. So we're going to have to use a negative 3 and a negative 1 because now the negative 1 times the negative 3, ooh, I've messed that little negative up. Let's put it in front of there, but that looks better. All right, so now this will give me a negative 3x, x times negative 3, negative 1 times x is a negative 1x. That gives me my negative 4x, and then my negative 1 times my negative 3 gives me my positive 3. So my factors are now going to be x minus 3, x minus 1 equals 0. Now that we have it to this point, we're going to take each one of our linear factors and we're going to set them equal to 0 and solve. So x minus 3 equals 0 when we add 3 to both sides gives us one of our solutions as x equal 3. And then we'll take the other one, x minus 1, and set it equal to 0. And then we'll add 1 to both sides, and the other solution will be x equal 1. But before we can claim these as our solutions, we have to make sure that they work. So we want to go back to our original equation, and we want to make sure that each one of these works because not all the time in a radical equation do they always work. Because remember, there are domain restrictions on radicals. So let's take a look. If we put the 3 in there and we let x equal 3, we get 4 times 3 minus 3 equals, and of course x is 3, so that would be the square root of 9 equals 3. That is a correct statement, so that checks. Now let's check the other one. If I put in 1, 4 times 1 minus 3 should equal 1. Let's make sure that works. So 4 minus 3 is 1. The square root of 1 equals 1. That also checks. So now we know that there are two solutions. X equal 3 and what? X equal 1. So here are our solutions to our equation. Now remember to always check because sometimes one won't work. If one won't work, we have what's called an extraneous. So make sure you're looking out for those extraneous solutions. And good luck on doing the next problem. See you next time. KJ out.